I like to think it's a connection. It's like we got the very modern stuff and the modern techniques, and then you're going back through the ages and you're collecting instruments on the way almost. It's
It's a journey through history. Just like this podcast.
Welcome to Echoes of History. I'm Dr. Holly Nielsen. Assassin's Creed Odyssey takes us back nearly 2,500 years to ancient Greece, an age whose music is lost to us. I've travelled to the very studio in London, England, where the music of Assassin's Creed Odyssey was made. I'll dive into the musical magic of the game with the composers themselves, the creative duo known as The Flight, and their friend and fellow composer, Mike Giorgiades. I'm here in the studio where the score for Assassin's Creed Odyssey was composed and recorded, and I'm joined by the composers themselves. Hello.
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 Hi,
Would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Alexis and I am one half of The Flight.
I'm Joe and I'm the other half.
And I'm Mike Giorgiades.
And thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk all things Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I'm going to get straight into the questions. Was this your first historical game?
No, it wasn't. We worked on the multiplayer of Assassin's Creed Black Flag,
Okay.
which was probably our first kind of go at something which had a historical element to it.
First game full stop, I think.
One of the
pretty
first
much,
games,
no?
yeah.
First game anyone would have heard of.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So that was set in pirate times. I'm going to say that doesn't sound very historically accurate, but pirate times. Golden Age pirate times, I think.
Golden Age piracy?
Yeah, I think that,
Yeah.
So we did a small amount on that, and we mainly, as historical reference, was British and Irish folk music of that era, which didn't require much historical research because it was all in my head anyway, because that's the music I was brought up on.
Okay.
So Odyssey was the first time we really got into something that we weren't familiar with.
Yeah, and how did it feel approaching a historical game? Were you kind of excited at the prospect? Was it a bit intimidating?
It was intimidating because of where it was set and when it was set, and also it's an Assassin's Creed game. As our first full Assassin's Creed game, I was on the bus when I saw the email and I rang Alec, got off the bus because I was panicking. So I went, oh my God, I don't know if can we do this? And you were confident.
With a game of this size, quite often you get asked to sign an NDA before you even know what it is. They asked us, would you be interested in pitching on something? And we were, yeah, sure, yeah, definitely. What is it? Well, hold on, you sign this first and then we'll tell you what it is. So it was a few days in between saying we're going to pitch for this and then finding out what it was. And it was like Saturday morning, my son was at football and we got the emails through, and basically Joe rang me as soon as it came through and he said, how are we going to do this? And I said, no, I can hear it straight away. I live in a bit of North London where there's loads of Greek people, and I was standing with lots of friends who, a lot of them were Greek or Greek Cypriot, and I was just standing there, and I think the Greekness was kind of flowing into me, and I just heard this kind of flighty drone thing and these bits of lyre on top, and I just thought, no, we can do this.
What Lex said to me actually is we mustn't forget that these are science fiction games. And they weren't asking us to do specifically authentic historical music. It's science fiction with elements taken from history and taken from the instruments of that era.
Very quickly on, we had this idea of combining our sound with the sound of as close as we could get to instruments of that period. So that was that flashed in straight away. Yeah. And 5 minutes later, we also both thought, let's get Mike involved in this as well. He can play anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
He can play anything as if it's got strings on it. And we just thought a lot of this is going to be live. Be good to have another person involved, and we think he'd be a really good fit.
It was absolutely great to be involved. I mean, I don't think I even knew what the game was until I think
signed
up.
an NDA.
Until you walked in the room.
You said, come down the studio, and then it's like it slowly dawned on me that what it was, and it was like, whoa, it's like it's like getting the keys to Concord or something, you know.
Mike's dad's family from...
My dad's Greek Cypriot. Dad always used to play sort of Greek folk music when we were growing up. But despite that, bouzouki was something I hardly picked up. I loved it actually, the experience of exploring different Greek instruments. That's not an ancient Greek instrument, obviously, as we'll probably get onto, but it was great to be involved.
Okay, so you've had this exciting call, you're off a bus, you're at a football match. And so what's the starting point?
On a game of this size, you don't just get the call, get on it straight away. The developer needs to know that they like what you're proposing for the score, that your idea will fit in with all of their creative visions. Quite often they've been working on the game that you're about to come onto for 5 years before. So they'll already have a lot of ideas about what they want the music to sound like, what they want the music to do. The first process it's quite an in-depth pitch. They want to make sure that you can do all the different aspects of the game soundtrack without asking you to do 6 months work. So they gave us quite a detailed document and asked us to do kind of 3 pieces of music. One for a battle sequence, one for a kind of mysterious area, and then another piece sort of encapsulating the feeling that we wanted to give the music. So we all got together and we thought, right, okay, this is a big thing. We really want this. Let's do 2 or 3 solid weeks on this. It's quite hard for composers to put that amount of time into a pitch because there's no guarantee that you're going to get this. You're up against a lot of other people and it's going to be a high standard. But if you want to win it, also you've got to start the process of what you would do if you had the whole game. We really wanted this one. We really wanted it, especially by the point we'd kind of started listening to stuff around it and looking at the Assassin's Creed games before that. We just thought, look, let's just pretend we've got this and start.
As let's say you've got 2 to 3 weeks, it was quite an intense bit of research we had to do. I went to the Horniman Museum and looked at their collection of musical instruments. Even just sitting in a room looking at them, you're kind of talking about soaking things up, kind of soaking up the vibes and looking at the instruments.
This is actually the first instrument we bought for this project. As I said, we were still at the pitching stage, so we didn't want to spend hundreds of pounds on instruments that we weren't necessarily going to get to use. So we found this rather fetching tiny little lyre from the early music company. It's actually got metal strings, this one. And normally they have nylon strings. The other 2 we've got are nylon strings ones, but it's a lovely sound, and one of the strings is a bit fuzzy, which kind of gives it that ancient.
Also, it's a lovely sound, but we've detuned it a little bit, so it's tuned lower than it should be, so it's a bit wibbly wobbly sounding. But I like it.
Any should be with these. It's whatever it is. But basically, you've got 10 strings, simple bridge, sound hole, going up to tuning pegs. Unfortunately, these tuning pegs are not geared or anything, so it's very sensitive. You need to use like a key to tune with, but because they're not geared like on a guitar, like very small movements make big changes in the pitch, which is what we spent about 30% of the time on Odyssey. We spent tuning.
Yeah.
And then 30%.
Also, as we went through the project, more and more strings arrived until we were playing instruments with lots, which we'll show you later. Yeah.
But anyway, I'll hand this over to Mike to show you what it sounds like.
Do you remember what we did? We did the pitch, didn't we?
Yeah, this is the first part of the pitch. I think it was the third piece, the thematic piece of the pitch.
Which you'll know as the Hills of Attica.
So
it's very quiet.
I have to play it quiet, otherwise it will bend.
And there's a car alarm going off at the moment, but that's totally normal for this studio.
Towers,
So don't let it stop you, or else you'll. There you are. It's gone. Yeah. This is a true representation
being in this studio
of recording Odyssey.
Authentic.
This is authentic.
How quiet that instrument is.
Yeah.
And we had to just wait for
between
a normal loudness instrument. It doesn't matter, little bits of background noise, it doesn't matter, because once you get it in a track with lots of other instruments, it doesn't matter. But something this quiet, let's say in this piece that I was playing a little bit from, this is like the instrument at the beginning of it. And then Mike did research on what kind of scales and modes they might have used.
We've got fragments of information. We know that the modes came from ancient Greece. We don't know exactly how they played the music. It's been reconstructed in a way that, it would make sense in terms of how the instruments are and things like that, the way they laid out, anything from the lyre to the aulos, although I don't think we got to.
We did a bit of the aulos on the pitch. They also there's no recordings obviously from that time. There's no YouTube videos of the era, so a lot of it, even sitting down and just looking at pictures of vases, with people. There was a lot of decoration on pottery from the time which shows, and art from the time that
It was obviously part of the culture in a big way.
There's already been a lot of historical research on it as well by historians.
Yeah.
More qualified than us.
Yeah.
But it was a combination of that. So we wanted to get an element of authenticity in using instruments like that to get us into the world, to the place, to put us in this gorgeous concept art that we were being sent. But we needed it to sound like our score as well. We didn't just want to reconstruct some ancient Greek folk pieces. We wanted to find things that we could use the way we wanted to write a score.
And in the game there is diegetic music. There are songs on the boats, and there are people playing instruments in the towns. We wanted to be different from that. We wanted to sound like score.
How do you match that with the kind of modern expectations of composition and then the historical flair?
We did this piece for the scene setting. Since we'd done it, I think we knew, we've got a good vibe here that sounds different, but also, most importantly, we could see how we could then populate an entire game with this sound that we'd found, which was kind of, it started from the three of us and having an instrument each, and kind of and playing these instruments we weren't necessarily that familiar with in the way that we would have picked up a guitar, a bass and a keyboard, you know? So we were kind of using our experience of songwriting and composing, but with some new instruments that made us go in different places.
It's lovely nowadays to constrain yourself and having instruments that we bought a few instruments for the pitch, and we bought more for the full game, having been constrained by the instruments that we're given. Some of them only have 4 strings, or they have a set scale on them. You tune them to a scale, because on a computer you can do anything. So it's really good.
Even on a guitar or piano.
You can do anything basically. So it's really nice to be. It's almost liberating in a way to be right. These are what we have to use here. And we did that more in the game as we were going along as well. We were splitting up the map and putting different instruments and scales and meters to different parts of the map.
But I think after that initial 3-piece sort of tryout at it, we could definitely see how we could do it for a much bigger scope.
I became less scared.
No, but then you've got the awful sort of 3 months of waiting. You sent it off. You've got all these ideas buzzing around. You've started the research for this job. It's just, you can't get it out of your head. You've got 3 months of waiting until they say,
you're on.
Well, it was kind of in time with how we were going to set things out, wasn't it? It was like we researched, for instance, the modes. We knew that would be a great way of diversifying the music throughout the geographical,
locations
of the game. And that became one of the main ways we divided things up.
I remember when I first played Odyssey, the thing that really struck me was, this map is enormous. This is a huge game.
Yes.
And obviously kind of the traditional or maybe stereotypical idea of video game music is it's separated by biomes.
Yes.
You have your desert music, you have your, water temple music, classic stuff. So how did you approach this huge map?
Exactly the same way.
Paradise Islands, Volcanic Islands, Arid Islands,
Yes.
Attica, Sparta. And this was after we'd done the kind of main thematic pieces of the game. We had a kind of overall sense of what palette we had
for the story and the characters and the antagonists.
Kind of mood, of the overall thing. And then we pinned these up on our wall with concept art, and we just kind of brainstormed, okay, what do we think of each of these? And some of them were easy, like Attica, it was like birthplace of democracy, mathematicians, playwrights, the symposium, So we wanted to make their music kind of as cultured and as civilized and stately as we could. I mean, these are stereotypes. There were also bloodthirsty Athenian warriors. But when we think of Sparta, we think of the 300. We think of the fierce warriors. We think of those, getting the kids to fight at a very early age.
But also, it was the family. It was where the main characters were from. It was the breadbasket of Greece. So it's a strange concept to think about. It may be to the outside of musically, but it's the kind of thing that we keyed off, even just looking at the colour of the regions.
Yes, yeah.
So we had 3 things at our disposal. We had the harmony, so the different modes that we'd picked. We had what we call the feel, which time signature and tempos, and sort of freedom around bar lines, and then instrumental palette. So the we wanted those two to be as kind of contrasting as possible. And then the other biomes, we got pictures up and we thought about what each of those would sound like. I mean, it's slightly more obvious with the islands because you'd think, okay, paradise, okay, that's going to be lush. It's going to be sort of more pleasant sounding.
Yeah,
and then the
trees and...
arid islands, dry, volcanic islands, spiky, stuff like this. But you've got to then translate that into those things I'm talking about.
The Athenian, the Attica was much more measured, sort of deliberate almost, stately. It reflected, like in the architecture and everything.
And lots more homophony.
Like very precise.
Precise.
Yeah.
It would be irregular sometimes, the bars, but it would be deliberate. It wouldn't be, and the more jammy kind of, rough and ready stuff, I suppose. Again, to break into cliches a little bit, but that would be the Spartans. And it just because it contrasted really well. It's just a way of.
And then you have bandit camps.
There's always, whatever game you do,
there's bandit camps.
Wherever it's set, whenever it's set, there's going to be bandits.
It's the great unifier of video games.
But so bandit camps, that was us jamming, especially those
Lawlessly.
Lawless jamming.
Usually drunk.
Brawling.
But still in time.
Yeah, exactly.
As much as possible.
And that's actually my favourite track of the game is Pirates, Thugs and Bandits, is it called? It's the bandit fight track.
I'd say that was your crowning moment.
It was great. It was great. It was exhausting, but it was great.
When they play that track in the, there's this Assassin's Creed concert that goes around, when they play that track there, the bouzouki player's got a job.
Yeah, he really does.
Do you just have pure sympathy? Like, I know that feeling.
If you're out there.
I'd like to ask, well, you're saying kind of when you first started, it was three of you together in a room jamming essentially with these different instruments. Is that quite rare for creating a video game score, or is that?
Yeah, it is actually, strangely, and it was pre-lockdown, and we did games since which we couldn't have done Odyssey in lockdown. Because a lot of it was us playing in rooms together and jamming.
But we were very used to that. It is rare, and since then we haven't done another score like that. But me and Joe, we both come from pop records backgrounds. To me, that was kind of the way I was used to it, rather than seeing a computer scoring like strings and things like that. So which a lot of composers find more comfortable. So.
And we had worked together, us three, before, in different projects as well. So it's not quite as intensely. It's like 4 hours of music, I think.
So you didn't go full method. You didn't kind of have a fire and helmets on and each of a different.
No, but writing the fight, writing the fight music, especially the bandit camps, it was full on. We were literally hit record and we were jamming and then cutting it up and it was. We weren't at battle, but there was a bit of shouting.
You can feel the energy of the music. So obviously Odyssey is a huge game. There's a lot of music to fill this huge game. How did you go about kind of dividing up the music? You said you had the constraints of these instruments that, had 4 strings or so. How did you go about then applying this to the map?
After the pitch, where we used this quite small lyre, and that's pretty much it in the pitch, wasn't everything else was kind of what we had.
We bowed some things.
Trying to sound. But that was the kind of featured of Greek origin instrument. We knew we needed to find more things like that. So we did a lot of reading about the instruments that historians think they had at the time, and then tried to find kind of the closest thing we could find now to them. And sometimes it was the same. So like with panpipes, which the ancient Greeks invented, you can buy a set of panpipes now which are probably almost identical to what they would have had then. They had an instrument called, I think is it a santor? That like a very early version of what we would call a hammered dulcimer. So we managed to find a second-hand old hammered dulcimer, which was quite a simple one, from this shop Hobgoblin.
These are designed to bounce.
And that was a key instrument. As soon as we found that's some instruments you just pick up and you play and you're like, wow, this has a great sound, and we could instantly hear that. It's not that far away from things that people use in Hollywood scores to kind of It always, when you hear it in a Hollywood score, it usually says, Eastern Europe or Central Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from the kind of maybe some of the bridge work and the tuning, it's pretty close to what they invented in the first place. So that was great. Then
the lyras are basically the same, aren't they?
Lyres are basically the same. We found a couple which had a few more strings on them, didn't we? Than perhaps they probably would have had, and again, the tuning. And then percussion was another big thing. You know, we knew we were going to have to use a lot of percussion, especially in the kind of action pieces, of which Assassin's Creed is an Assassin's Creed game. It's mostly fighting.
Yeah.
Again, we looked at what percussion they might have had at the time, and they were, you know, it's like drums for the battles.
But ancient Greek instruments, they are the root of quite a lot of modern stuff. So you have quite a lot to work with potentially. Or?
So the last couple of things, we had lots of string stuff, we had lots of percussion instruments, but then we wanted to see about blown instruments, and there's the aulos, which was this is a instrument that kept coming up, and it was the one we couldn't really ever get hold of.
No, we got a chanter from a bagpipe, which is the closest thing we could find. Awful to play.
And again, because it's Assassin's Creed, we can sort of double it with like synths and stuff like that to really boost it and manipulate it. So we can take instruments that, you know, the ones we couldn't get, we can put them together in different ways, you know. Like.
We got as close as possible. So the precursor of the guitar, as we know it, was the Greek kitara. You can't buy them, or at least you can't buy them in London. So we tried to find some old fretted strung instruments that we could play kind of in the same way, or using, you know, in the way that we would use a guitar. We would use a banjo or something like that.
I guess it just sort of did this, like, isn't it? Because it's more resembling a harp, the guitar, but they started to play it in ways that resembled the guitar. Okay. You know, like I was saying with bends and stuff, they started to. It was more of an elaborate, developed version of the lyre, and it was like a professional kind of thing at the time. It was brighter sounding, so it was stepping away from the purely accompaniment side of things, and I think again the mix with the global stuff, you know, it then emerged more like the bouzouki via Turkey and the saz and things like this centuries later, really.
We got a saz, didn't we? So we can do quarter tuning on and things, and then we introduced the bouzouki as well.
Yeah,
because it's a modern instrument. You can trace its lineage back through the.
It's not
modern.
No, it's modern as in later, after we'd finished Odyssey and everything, I actually finally went to Athens because I'd always wanted to see the Acropolis in reality. And at the foot of the Acropolis is a museum of Greek folk instruments.
Oh wow!
And it's absolutely brilliant. It would have been. We should have gone there. We absolutely should have gone there to begin with. It actually proved. Like the photos I took were all like, yeah, we were right.
That is an important part of it, actually, is the difference between looking at pictures or watching videos. And YouTube is brilliant. You can find everything. Seeing an instrument or holding an instrument and hearing its tones and stuff and having hands on it is very different than looking at a book or watching a video or listening to recordings of it. It's once you get it in your hands. And you were brilliant with the bouzouki. And that opened up a whole other thing because it's tuned in a way, it's played closer to playing a guitar. It's tuned in a way that you got your head around very quickly, and it's a good driving, powerful instrument.
Yeah, I mean, like all kinds of instruments, I do experiment with the tuning to fit what we're doing a lot of the time. But I think it's important to start with the traditional tunings, and then you get the note relationships, and you really explore the music, and then again in the style of Assassin's Creed, you can take it in your own place because I guess the point is to create your own unique music for the game.
And while the bouzouki was not available in those times, we like to think that if it was, then the Spartans that we used it mostly for would have loved it.
Yes, and there's also, you've got a root the player you have this kind of, games are interesting because it's a negotiation between player and developer, and then you're kind of creating this. And so having something that, okay, this might not necessarily be, quote unquote accurate, but it helps root the player.
Absolutely, in a totally recognisable, very specific instrument from the area, and it's a really cool.
I like to think it's a connection. It's like we got the very modern stuff and the modern techniques, and then you're going back through the ages and you're collecting instruments on the way almost. It's a
journey through history. Just like this podcast.
Do you have any specific kind of musical inspirations, as in other artists or anything like that? Or was it mainly from the instruments themselves?
What we found very early on, because again, this is a big part of research that we do on everything we start, is we listen around. If we got offered a game set in ancient Greece, first thing we did was watch films of the myths and legends of that. So what Hollywood has done, basically. So we watched Troy, and we watched
300
and all that. But none of those scores were really kind of trying to do what we wanted to do. So we actually found that no one had really attempted to do what we were attempting to do. Mostly the scores to those films are Hollywood scores, Bollywood action scores, perhaps with a touch of the area, but we didn't hear it anywhere else. So that's quite good.
We didn't look at any games specifically either, and that is a big difference as well. Is writing music for a film and writing music for a game is different in many ways as well. Writing music which works systemically in exploration music, into fight music and stealth music. Then you write music to the cinematics, which are the fixed scenes that can link scenes or kick off things that happen in the game. It's like working on a film and working on all the systemic stuff at the same time. So it's different from doing TV and film in that way, although it is just music. And we're delivering it in layers and stems which are mixes of certain groupings of instruments.
We also there are quite a lot of Greek kind of reconstruction bands in Greece who try and present the closest they can get to what the music was of that time, because that time in Greek history is really celebrated in Greece still. It's a big part of their culture and about what they're proud of and their heritage. And we did listen to that, but we also knew that wasn't exactly what we wanted to do either. Because that being completely kind of just folk instrumentation, just pieces that were written then.
Searching for accuracy and historical accuracy.
Yeah, exactly. That wasn't what we wanted to do either. So we had these two kind of extremes, and we knew that we wanted to do something in the middle, basically. Yeah.
We could have gone much further in terms of the traditional way. I mean, you could talk about the kind of the tuning that they use or anything like. But we do, we knew that would just confuse people. For instance, the use of the modes. I find it really interesting that our perception of the modes is different from how it was then. Like if you're talking about the Dorian mode, and we see it as a kind of folky, sort of minor key, whereas they saw it as kind of brave, battle-ready kind of sound.
Yeah.
And then Lydian, they see it as a sort of mistrusting, and we see it as this floaty kind of heavenly sound. So it's just really interesting. So if we'd have been totally authentic, we'd have just confused everybody. Basically, the Hollywood stuff sets the expectations.
One of the big breakthroughs was when we were doing some of the Spartan music, and we just went, no, they're warriors and they're rock and roll. So we could then and we literally got out modern bass guitars and distortion pedals, and we did the Legend of the Eagle Bearer. But that kind of opened the doors to everything else coming into it. And
the exploration pieces, when you're walking around the world, they're probably the most traditional. I say traditional in inverted commas, the most
where we use most traditional elements.
Yeah, most traditional elements, where we tried to be more in sympathy with the setting and the time. And then as you get into the heavier pieces and the storytelling pieces, we become a bit more free of that, and we're going towards more 21st century scoring. And for instance, someone's getting thrown off a cliff, you're going to need a Western orchestra.
Yeah. Yes.
You're going to need in there. You can't just do that with harps and aulos. Well, we couldn't anyway. So we still.
No, you want the sense of scale sometimes, and sometimes to hit emotional things. There's other instruments that you have to bring in to help it along.
But that's the nice thing about a game score. There are opportunities to be, really minimal stuff, and then there's like full on.
You were talking about the modes and the kind of, to us and the perception, oh, this sounds like this, but that is absolutely fine. It's like the kind of musical equivalent of the Tiffany problem, if you've heard of that.
No, what's the Tiffany problem?
Tiffany problem it's probably history hit. People are probably rolling their eyes. They must hear it a lot. But it's basically...
Never heard this.
It's basically the idea, of kind of... things that sound anachronistic, so Tiffany being a name that is actually a medieval name, but if you had a setting that was medieval and you had a character called Tiffany, a modern audience would kind of go, hang on a second, that doesn't sound right.
Right.
A lot of things we take as just being modern or all of this, it's actually much more complicated than that, and to a modern audience it would take them out immediately, even though you could say, well, it's more accurate.
So that's a bit like what we found as we were looking at instruments. Every time we realised, they had this, we just be like, yes! It was like, brilliant.
Yeah.
That's an instrument that'll be really useful to us. We know we can play, we know we can get. Yeah. Fantastic. And we're actually quite surprised at kind of what came from that. I mean, maybe that sounds really ignorant, because obviously they were highly advanced, civilization, and loads of things were invented in ancient Greece. I suppose because we'd never looked at it before
that closely.
You don't always. Exactly. I'd never really thought about the lineage of instruments that we just take for granted here, because you can get anything.
And I guess the further back you go, the more core the lineage is. You have these bits that, rather than these quite specific things, you have these really fundamental parts that you've got the scores, but it's not quite like a film score. Then you've got the folk music, but a bit like that. But then the other thing you have to take into consideration is that it's an Assassin's Creed game. You're doing all of this, and then you've got that added layer. What was it like working with that?
We got to Ezio's theme quite late in the process.
Yeah, probably like 2/3 through, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we'd already set our table and got all our...
We were locked into the sound.
Yeah. So we did a little bit of research into Assassin's Creed music, and looked at how other people had looked at the theme and what instruments are used a lot in Assassin's, like electric guitars, distorted guitars and things. We felt empowered to attack it then.
I just remember it being really fun and natural.
It was.
Because you say, we'd already established the sound of the score. And then we had the third thing, which was the common thread of the games, just to sort of just link it all together.
And that main figure just sits perfectly on a lyre.
Yes, it does. Yeah. The repeating phrase that repeats through it, it's a very simple,
which is why it's been so successful.
Malleable piece of music that everyone is now so familiar with. So it was surprisingly wasn't scary. We were already comfortable with it.
Basically, however you played it, it sounded good. Basically,
cool. That's
so.
And all through all the different Assassin's Creeds. Now you can play it in any setting on any set of instruments, and it works.
Speaking to people who've worked on Odyssey before, there's a sense that often there's a freedom that comes with going further back in the past and having these mythical elements than maybe a game that has a later setting where there's more documentation, we know a bit more. Did you find that freeing, or was it difficult?
What was always in the back of my head is this is a science fiction game. It's not a time travel game, but it uses those kind of elements, and it's a modern science fiction game. We felt empowered but Ubisoft do a modern score, do something that sounds really modern and cool.
Obviously, instruments, key part, big part. Did you have a favourite instrument to work with?
The lyres are beautiful.
Yeah,
they're just beautiful sounding. They're lovely. They record really well. The hammered dulcimer, I seem to remember the most of the game is me tuning that up. But
that was my least favourite, I have to say, just because of the tuning.
Yeah, that was my favourite.
Way longer to tune than to play.
That was such a useful instrument. You could play accompaniment on it. You could play melodies on it. Yeah, and you could go diddling as well whenever anything dramatic happened. Yeah.
You got that shorthand.
Yes.
Anything as composers, if an instrument could do more than one job.
Yeah. It's good. But I like the lyres.
They sound beautiful. Yeah.
My least favourite is the aulos. I also found the panpipes very difficult.
Oh, okay.
Because we try and play everything ourselves.
Yes.
And sometimes a really simple looking instrument. We had it recently on another thing. Something that looks really simple. It's actually quite a difficult thing to play.
Do you know what we ended up doing with the panpipers? We ended up sampling it and making it into a pad.
Yes, we did. That was great.
We just sampled each tube. And then spread it across the keyboard, took off the attack and release, and just made it into a lovely pad that we used in the mysterious forests.
But again, that's an example of using something ancient in a modern way to create this unique texture that no one else has, no one else has that instrument quite the same way. So,
was there anything that you learnt specifically for Odyssey, or the idea of just picking up an instrument and being able to play it is beyond my comprehension? Was there anything that was completely new to you, or had you played around with these before?
It's one of the pleasures of doing this job, really, is that we get to just try out new instruments, learn about it, but also interpret it in our own way.
Had you played the bouzouki before?
I hadn't much, no. Like I say, despite my dad's heritage, I tried it once, I think, in my life. Aside the fact that it just sort of slips off your lap every 5 seconds, it's beautiful. And I'd say that was my favourite instrument because it's got real energy when you sort of dig into it. And
I'm very fond of naivety and recording naivety, and so we go out and buy instruments, and for me it makes it sound real and human when you can't really play it. And again, we're working on this project for a long time. We learn the instrument as we go through. Well, we do it on most of the jobs that we work on. We try and do that.
It also gives you probably a sense of where they would have been appropriate to play, because you said the lyre, you mentioned the lyre, and you were like, oh, it's quick to tune. And you said, oh, so that's probably one of the reasons why it's so popular. It's portable.
Yeah,
easy
you
to
can
use.
get there's beautiful sounding things.
it was an accompaniment instrument to a lot of what they did. So the legend goes.
So theatre.
Theatre, everything. Yeah.
You're kind of doing living history via.
Yeah. One thing that I realised when we were doing it though, because this very noisy studio, and the instruments are all very quiet at the time. It must have been quite hard to make a decent kind of amount of sound.
The world was quieter then back then, maybe.
Who knows? I mean, who knows?
Nobody knows.
Let's ask a historian. I know, but you don't hear of there being like a lyre orchestra and 20 panpipe players all together. You always see pictures of just one or two musicians together, and it
must have been very
quiet.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a term that's happening in history at the moment called sensory history, and a big part of that is about listening and music and things like that. And that is one of the big questions of, particularly when it comes to like battle music and stuff, is did anybody actually hear this?
That's where something like the Aulos
Yes.
would have been amazing, and that's what bagpipes were for. Is war instruments and drums, putting fear into the people across the other side of the field and all that.
There is nothing more terrifying than a bagpipe.
No, exactly.
Oh, no, hold on now. Both me and Mike are half Scottish.
No, but you won't.
We well up when
no,
bagpipes.
absolutely. But if you heard one coming across the other side of the forest, and you only need one.
In Odyssey, it was the first Assassin's Creed to have these massive battles that you could get involved in. Like it starts with the Battle of the 300, which most people know about, and then there's other moments in the game. We wanted the music in those things to be almost like it was there. We tried to keep it to just percussion. Then they're like, can we maybe have a bit more than that? So then we tried to keep it just percussion and a single monophonic melody because we wanted it to be as if it could be the soldiers. It could be some of the soldiers in the rear playing that to get the other soldiers motivated. It's 90% percussion and just like a fake Aulos because we couldn't get a real one. So.
That leads me in nicely to the next question, which I think I know the answer to, which is there any instrument you wish you could have used? Is it the Aulos? Is it the elusive Aulos?
Could have got a real one,
Yeah, it would have been great to really explore it properly.
Did you ever see the water organ? I can't remember what it's called.
That's right. That
got beautiful sounds. Again,
elusive.
Pretty impossible.
No, I think the music would have sounded 22% better had we gone to Greece and recorded it on a beach.
I argue the same for my research, strangely, Always better on a beach.
But there's a point to that. It's sometimes that financial constraints mean you can't go to Greece.
No, I remember during the game, you always see quite a lot of like promotional pictures of the directors and the writers going out, walking around the Acropolis and like.
So what's the water organ?
I think it's called the hydraulis. Basically, I don't know how they use it. I saw someone play it, and it's a small keyboard type instrument with pipes, but somehow they use water to.
But it wasn't using not.
I don't know.
I mean, obviously,
we saw some drawings of it, and
was it Archimedes? Did Archimedes invent it?
Videos of it.
Yeah, we don't know.
That was totally made up.
We don't know. That would have been cool.
Do we know what it sounded like?
We don't probably know what it sounded like, but someone's guessing.
And
Probably really, really quiet.
There are videos. They're very quiet. They're very quiet, but it's a lovely mellow sounding organ sound. Yeah.
Okay, so huge journey working on Odyssey. You know, well, you're working on this game for a long time. What did you learn making Odyssey?
A few things. In hindsight, we did it in quite difficult. It was work intensive, may I say, because of playing most of it live, a lot of it jamming. It was work intensive, and maybe actually I wouldn't have done it another way. But we did at the end of it go. That was a really intensive. Especially, Alexis had to do a lot of getting things into shape after we threw stuff at the computer, and then you edited stuff and getting certain things in time or in tune and stuff. So it was a very work intensive. And also soon after that was lockdown, and I realised we couldn't have done a game. We couldn't have done a project in the same way during lockdown.
The biggest thing I learned was what we've just been talking about. I found it absolutely fascinating. All of the research and looking back at. Finding these instruments that we'd never touched on anything before, and we may not get to use again. And even more kind of respect for the ancient Greeks and what they were way ahead of. Like, we were all just crawling about in mud, weren't we? And they were doing all this amazing these instruments and
being very quiet.
Democracy.
Beautiful quiet.
Beautiful quiet instruments. Yeah. Although we're sitting here talking about this now, when you're a composer, you don't expect to be doing things like that. That's something that me and Joe, we really love about doing stuff for games, is we find ourselves doing these things to do with, just off to do with creating the score for the game, but it's not actually writing music. And we suddenly think, oh gosh, this is fun. Yeah. We're really lucky.
You get to
doing
play.
Something like this. Yeah.
I certainly learnt the instruments, and again, that's what I say, it's the biggest pleasure of any project, is what you learn about, the game's got this story and this, in this case, the history, and you learn all about that. Aside from that, I have to say I learned from these guys, really, I've worked with them before, but not on a big project like this, and, it's fantastic working through the AAA game process, and, working under pressure, as a composer is such a great skill to have, and to be able to get through things like this. We did an insane amount of music. Sometimes we did it together, sometimes we did it apart, and worked out great.
When it's now 7 years old, this score, I do listen back to it, and I'm really glad that it has that live heart all the way through it. And I'm really glad that we did that. It's very hard to listen back to things you've done, but I listen back to that and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, it's authentic not in a historical way, authentic to the instruments and to the game as well, and to ourselves. Yeah.
And I imagine now you bust out the bouzouki at every given opportunity.
Never touched it since. It's been in that corner since. They've never touching that again.
Gathering dust.
It's got its place in my heart. Let's just say.
Good answer.
No, I'm sure I'll be playing it again.
We had a little practice earlier on, and it was the first time we've got it out in a long time. Yeah.
We've heard about your favourite bit of music from the game. You're saying the bandits and the. Do you guys have a favourite piece? Can you?
My favourite piece is what we called the family theme,
what's
which
it called
was
now?
On the soundtrack. I think it's called A Happy Family. There's dual protagonists in Odyssey, and they both come from the same family. And your father is the Spartan general Nikolaos. We wanted them to have a family theme that was kind of mournful but not sad, kind of nostalgic but not corny or anything like that. That was one of the first pieces we did. Yeah, I just love that because to me it just sounds really, really evocative and really folky.
Yeah, we did that before the main theme, didn't we?
Did that before.
Before Legend of the Eagle Bearer, which is my favourite. Which is because it's a banger, and it was like when we did it, and we were like, we got it. This is it.
Well, that's because we wrote the family theme, and then we realised, okay, this is good for them, but it doesn't describe them as warriors. It just describes them, everything else in their lives, everything else they do, but we still need a piece for them being warriors, for being mercenaries.
I remember we were stood here and we were yelling at each other, and basically but the theme that ended up on the thing was very cool.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
talking about
Thanks
this.
so
This was so much fun. And I'm looking forward to now hearing some of these instruments and famous bouzouki playing.
Built it up now.
No pressure.